r/malicious compliance, stepson destroyed my phone, so I got him fired. r/malicious compliance, stepson destroyed my phone, so I got him fired. The satisfying crack of my $1,200 iPhone hitting the kitchen tiles still echoes in my ears 3 days later. Not satisfying because I enjoyed it, satisfying because it was the sound of my last fuck leaving the building. I'm still shaking as I type this on my ancient laptop, but you need the full story to understand why I just nuked my stepson's life from orbit. It started Tuesday night. I, 34F, came home from a brutal 12-hour shift at the hospital to find my kitchen looking like a tornado hit it. Dishes everywhere, food crusted on the counters, and the stove still on with a pan of what used to be mac and cheese now resembling charcoal. My stepson Jake, 19M, was sprawled on my couch, the one I bought with my own money, gaming with his headset on, completely oblivious to the disaster he'd created. "Jake." I called out. "Nothing. Jake." He finally pulled one side of his headset off and looked at me like I'd just interrupted brain surgery. "What?" "The kitchen is destroyed, and you left the stove on. You could have burned down the house." He shrugged. "I was gonna clean it later." Later. Always later with this kid. For 2 years since I married his father, it's been the same story. Jake treats me like I'm some random roommate instead of his stepmother, despite me paying half the mortgage on the house he lives in rent-free. "Clean it now," I said, keeping my voice level. "And next time, turn off the stove when you're done cooking." That's when his face twisted into that familiar sneer I'd grown to hate. "You're not my mom. Stop acting like you can tell me what to do." I'd heard this line approximately 847 times in 2 years, and something in me just snapped. Maybe it was the 12-hour shift, maybe it was coming home to a potential fire hazard, or maybe it was just 2 years of accumulated disrespect finally reaching its breaking point. "I'm not trying to be your mom," I said, my voice getting louder. "But I am an adult who lives here and pays the bills, and you will respect basic safety rules in this house." Jake stood up, all 6 feet 2 inches of him, trying to intimidate me. "Or what? Or you can find somewhere else to live." That's when he lost it. Started screaming about how I was a controlling bitch, how I was trying to replace his real mom, how his dad would never choose me over him. The usual greatest hits album. I was recording him on my phone, not to post anywhere, but because I was tired of my husband Tom not believing how bad Jake's outbursts actually get. He always manages to calm down before his dad gets home, leaving me looking like the unreasonable one. Jake noticed the phone. "Are you recording me?" "Yes, so your father can see." Before I could finish the sentence, Jake lunged forward and snatched my phone right out of my hands. I watched in horror as he raised it above his head and slammed it down onto the kitchen floor with enough force to shatter it into about 15 pieces. "There," he said, breathing hard. "Now you can't spy on me anymore." I stared at the remains of my phone, my lifeline to work, my photos, my everything, scattered across the floor like electronic confetti. The screen was completely destroyed, the case cracked beyond repair. $1,200, gone in 2 seconds of pure spite. That's when I realized something important. I was done playing defense. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake stood there, chest heaving, looking at the destruction he'd just caused. For a split second, I saw something flicker across his face, maybe regret, maybe fear, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Oops," he said, not sounding sorry at all. If anything, he looked pleased with himself. I knelt down and started gathering the pieces of my phone, my hands trembling with rage. The back camera was completely separated from the body. The screen looked like a spider web. 2 years of photos, gone. My work contacts, my patient notes, my entire digital life, destroyed because a grown man couldn't handle being told to clean up after himself. "You're going to replace this," I said quietly, still crouched on the floor. Jake snorted. "With what money?" "I'm unemployed, remember?" He wasn't unemployed. He just started a job at a local auto parts store 2 weeks ago, his first real job ever, after months of his father begging him to find work. But Jake loved playing the victim, loved pretending he was powerless when it was convenient. "Then you'll figure it out," I said, standing up with the phone pieces kept in my hands like I was holding a dead bird. "You broke it, you bought it. Good luck with that." He plopped back down on the couch and put his headset back on, dismissing me entirely. I stood there for a moment, really looking at him. This wasn't some troubled kid acting out, this was a calculated display of dominance. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew there would be no consequences. There never were. When Tom got home an hour later, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the phone pieces laid out in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. I'd cleaned up Jake's mess myself because I couldn't stand looking at it anymore, which probably wasn't the smartest move strategically, but I needed something to do with my hands before I did something I'd regret. "What happened here?" Tom asked, looking at the phone carnage. I explained everything, the kitchen, the stove, the argument, and finally the phone. Tom listened with that familiar expression he gets when he doesn't want to deal with conflict, slightly glazed eyes and a tight smile that doesn't reach anywhere near his face. "Jake," he called out. Our household prince emerged from his gaming cave, putting on his perfect son act. With his father, Jake transforms into this reasonable, slightly sheepish young man who's just trying his best in a difficult situation. "Dad, I'm really sorry," Jake said, and I had to admire the performance. I lost my temper. "I know it was wrong. You destroyed Emma's phone, son." "I know, and I feel terrible about it. I was just frustrated because she was recording me without permission, you know? It felt like an invasion of privacy." I watched Tom's expression soften. This was how it always went. Jake would throw a tantrum with me, then play the misunderstood victim with his father. "Recording someone in their own home without consent isn't cool, Tom said gently, and I felt my blood pressure spike. "Are you serious right now?" I asked. "He destroyed my property, and you're lecturing me about recording him?" "I'm just saying maybe there's blame on both sides here." Both sides. There it was, the phrase that had become the soundtrack to my marriage. No matter what Jake did, no matter how clearly he was in the wrong, somehow it always came down to both sides. "So what's he going to do about my phone?" I pressed. Tom sighed. "Jake, you need to make this right." "I will, Dad. As soon as I get paid." As soon as he got paid. with his brand new job that he'd somehow managed to land despite his charming personality. That's when the idea first started forming. 3 weeks passed, and guess what? No phone replacement. Every time I brought it up, Jake had a new excuse. First, he was waiting for his first paycheck. Then it was I had to pay Dad back for something first. Then it became I'm saving up, but car insurance is due. Meanwhile, I was stuck using Tom's old cracked Android that barely functioned. Half my apps wouldn't work, the camera was garbage, and I kept missing important calls from work because the thing would randomly restart itself. But every evening, I'd watch Jake come home from his job at AutoZone with energy drinks and fast food, clearly spending his paycheck on everything except what he owed me. He's trying, Tom would say whenever I complained. You have to be patient with him. Patient. Right. Like I'd been patient when Jake borrowed my car and returned it on empty. Like I'd been patient when he threw a party while we were out of town and left beer bottles in my garden. Like I'd been patient through 2 years of being treated like an unwelcome guest in my own home. The breaking point came when I saw Jake's Instagram story showing off his brand new gaming headset, a $300 monstrosity with LED lights and premium everything. He was practically gloating about it, posting multiple videos of his setup upgrade while I was still carrying around a phone held together with a case and prayers. I screenshotted everything before confronting him. Nice headset, I said that evening, finding him in his usual spot on the couch. Must have been expensive. He didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Yeah, I saved up for it. Saved up? I showed him the screenshots. You saved up $300 for a headset, but you can't save $1,200 for the phone you destroyed? Jake shrugged. I need the headset for work. I do customer service calls sometimes. It was such obvious bullshit that I actually laughed. You work at an auto parts store, Jake. You're not doing remote customer service. Whatever. I'll get you the money eventually. Eventually. The word that meant never in Jake's vocabulary. That night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went through Jake's room while he was at work. I know, invasion of privacy and all that. But I was desperate to understand how this kid's mind worked, how he could be so cavalier about destroying something that expensive and important. What I found was enlightening. Receipts everywhere, DoorDash, GameStop, various fast food places, gas station energy drinks. In 3 weeks of working, he'd blown through probably $600 on complete garbage. There were also job applications scattered around his desk, which surprised me. If he had a job, why was he still applying places? That's when I found the AutoZone application, and everything clicked into place. Under the section about criminal history, Jake had marked no to having any prior convictions. But I knew that wasn't true. Last year, before I married Tom, Jake had been arrested for shoplifting and vandalism, stupid teenage stuff that resulted in misdemeanor charges. Tom had paid for a lawyer, and Jake got community service and probation. I stared at the application, my heart racing. This was fraud. Jake had lied on his job application, probably because he knew a background check would disqualify him from most retail positions. And suddenly, I had leverage. I took a picture of the application with my broken phone, making sure the false information was clearly visible. For the first time in 3 weeks, I smiled. Jake wanted to play games? Fine. I'd learned from the best manipulator in the house. But I was about to teach him that some games have consequences. I spent the next 2 days researching employment law and background check policies, diving deep into Reddit threads and legal advice forums during my lunch breaks. What I learned was fascinating and infuriating in equal measure. Lying on a job application about criminal history wasn't just grounds for termination, it was considered fraud in most states. Companies took it seriously because it showed a fundamental lack of honesty and integrity. But I also discovered something else: most employers don't run background checks immediately. They're expensive, so smaller companies often wait until after the probationary period, or sometimes they skip them altogether for lower-level positions. Jake had probably been banking on AutoZone never finding out about his record. The more I researched, the more conflicted I became. Was I really considering sabotaging my stepson's job over a phone? But then I'd remember his smirk, his casual dismissal, the way he'd gone back to gaming like destroying my property was just another Tuesday. And that $300 headset, the final slap in the face that proved he had money, he just didn't think he owed me anything. On Thursday evening, Jake came home particularly pleased with himself. I was in the kitchen making dinner when he walked in, practically bouncing. Guess what? He announced to Tom, who was sitting at the counter. Mike's throwing a party this weekend, and I can finally afford to contribute something good. Thinking about getting a couple bottles of that expensive stuff you like, Dad. Tom beamed. That's great, son. I'm proud of you for being responsible with your money. I turned around slowly, wooden spoon still in my hand. Responsible? Yeah, Jake said, looking right at me. I'm learning to budget and prioritize. It's all about making smart financial choices. The audacity was breathtaking. He was literally talking about buying expensive alcohol while owing me over $1,000, and somehow framing it as financial responsibility. Tom nodded approvingly, completely missing the irony. What about Emma's phone? Tom asked, almost as an afterthought. Jake's expression shifted to his practiced look of earnest regret. I'm working on it, Dad. These things take time when you're trying to be financially responsible. I don't want to just buy her some cheap replacement, I want to get her something really nice. It was masterful manipulation. He turned his refusal to pay into a virtue, making it sound like the delay was actually consideration for me. Tom ate it up completely. See? Tom said to me quietly. He's trying to do the right thing. That night, I made my decision. I created a new email account using a generic name, then carefully crafted a message to AutoZone's corporate HR department. I kept it simple and factual. I was writing to report that an employee at their local store had falsified information on his job application by claiming no criminal history when he actually had misdemeanor convictions for shoplifting and vandalism. I included Jake's full name, the store location, and his approximate hire date. I didn't include the photo of his application, that would have made it obvious the tip came from inside the house. Instead, I suggested they run a background check to verify the accuracy of his application materials. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. The email disappeared into the digital void, and immediately I felt a mixture of satisfaction and terror. There was no taking it back now. I just launched a missile at Jake's employment, and I had no idea what the collateral damage might be. I closed the laptop and went to bed, where Tom was already asleep. As I lay there in the dark, listening to Jake's voice echoing from downstairs as he played games with his friends, I wondered if I'd just crossed a line I could never uncross. But then I remembered the sound of my phone hitting the wall, and I decided I could live with the consequences. The response came faster than I expected. Friday afternoon, I was sitting at my desk pretending to work on quarterly reports when my personal email pinged. AutoZone's HR department had replied with a brief, professional message thanking me for bringing the matter to their attention and confirming they would investigate immediately. My stomach dropped. I'd expected bureaucratic delays, maybe weeks of back and forth. But this sounded urgent, like they were taking it seriously enough to act quickly. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept racing through scenarios. What if they called Jake in for questioning? What if he somehow figured out it was me? What if Tom found out before Jake even got fired? I'd been so focused on the satisfaction of revenge that I hadn't fully considered how explosive this could get. The waiting was torture. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be Tom calling with questions I couldn't answer. But Friday evening came and went normally. Jake went to work, came home, and spent his usual fortune on DoorDash while complaining about being broke. Saturday morning, I was doing laundry when I heard Jake's phone ring upstairs. His voice was muffled through the floor, but the tone caught my attention, surprised, then increasingly defensive. My heart started pounding as I crept closer to the stairs. No, that's not. I thought those charges were sealed, I heard him say. Can we talk about this on Monday? I'm not scheduled today. There was a long pause, then, what do you mean immediate termination? I've been a good employee. I quickly moved away from the stairs before he came down, my pulse racing. It was happening. Part of me felt vindicated, finally, consequences for his actions. But another part felt something uncomfortably close to panic. Jake thundered down the stairs 20 minutes later, already dressed and grabbing his keys. I have to go handle something, he announced to Tom, who was reading the paper in the living room. Everything okay, son? Yeah, just work stuff. I'll be back later. After Jake left, Tom looked puzzled. He seemed upset. And why would he need to go to work on his day off? I made noncommittal sounds and buried myself in folding laundry, trying to look casual while my mind raced. Jake was probably at AutoZone right now, trying to explain or appeal the decision. Maybe he'd find a way to talk his way out of it. Maybe I'd gone through all this stress for nothing. But deep down, I knew better. You can't lie on a job application, especially not about criminal history. Jake was about to learn that actions have consequences, a lesson apparently no one else in his life had bothered to teach him. The real test would come when he got home. Would he tell Tom the truth about why he was fired? Would he spin it as unfair treatment or bad management? Jake was skilled at playing the victim, and Tom was always ready to believe his son was being wronged by an unfair world. I spent the rest of Saturday in a state of nervous energy, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning and starting projects I couldn't finish. Tom noticed my restlessness but attributed it to work stress. If only he knew his wife had just torched his son's employment prospects while folding his underwear. By evening, Jake still wasn't back. Tom tried calling him twice, but both calls went to voicemail. Maybe he picked up an extra shift, Tom said hopefully. He's been so dedicated to that job. I nodded and agreed, tasting bile. Tomorrow was going to change everything in this house, and I was the only one who saw it coming. Jake didn't come home Saturday night. By Sunday morning, Tom was genuinely worried, pacing the kitchen while his coffee went cold. This isn't like him, he kept saying. Even when he stays out late, he always comes home. I made appropriate concerned noises while internally spiraling. What if Jake had done something reckless? What if losing his job had pushed him over some edge I hadn't considered? The vindictive satisfaction I'd felt was rapidly being replaced by a gnawing anxiety that maybe I'd miscalculated how devastating this would be for him. Should we call the police? Tom asked, already reaching for his phone. Let's wait a little longer, I said quickly. He's 19, not 9. Maybe he just needed space to think. Tom looked at me like I'd suggested we abandon a missing child. Space to think about what? He was fine yesterday morning. I couldn't exactly explain that Jake was probably processing the complete implosion of his employment prospects, so I just shrugged helplessly. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now in the position of covering for Jake's absence when I was the reason for it. Around noon, Tom's phone finally rang. Jake's name appeared on the screen, and Tom practically lunged for it. Jake? Where the hell are you? We've been worried sick. I could hear Jake's voice through the phone, but not clearly enough to make out words. Tom's expression shifted from relief to confusion to something approaching anger. What do you mean you got fired? For what? My stomach clenched as Tom listened, his frown deepening with whatever story Jake was spinning. That's ridiculous. Did you talk to a manager? What about HR? Another pause. Well, we need to discuss this. Come home. No, come home now, Jake. Whatever happened, we'll figure it out together. Tom hung up and immediately turned to me. Jake got fired yesterday. Says it was some kind of mix-up with his paperwork, but he's too embarrassed to talk about it. He's been staying at his friend Mike's place. That's awful, I managed, wondering what version of events Jake was preparing. Would he admit to the criminal charges? Would he claim the background check was wrong? Jake was creative with the truth, but this situation didn't leave him much wiggle room. I don't understand how there could be a paperwork mix-up bad enough to get someone fired immediately, Tom continued, starting to pace again. He's been working there for months without any problems. I nodded sympathetically while my mind raced. If Jake told even a partial truth about the background check, Tom might start asking questions about how AutoZone suddenly discovered information they'd supposedly missed during hiring. If Jake lied completely, he'd eventually get caught when Tom inevitably called the store to complain. Maybe we should let him explain when he gets here, I suggested. Tom wasn't listening. He was already dialing another number. I'm calling AutoZone. If they wrongfully terminated my son, they need to fix it. Tom, wait. But he was already speaking to whoever answered. Hi, this is Tom Mitchell. My son Jake works at your location, and there seems to have been some kind of mistake with his termination yesterday. I watched in horror as Tom's confident expression slowly crumbled. Criminal history? What criminal history? He looked at me, bewildered. No, there must be some mistake. Jake doesn't have a criminal record. The person on the other end was apparently explaining something, because Tom went quiet for a long time, just listening. When he finally spoke again, his voice was different, smaller, confused. I see. Thank you for your time. He hung up and stared at the phone for a moment before looking at me. They said Jake lied on his application about having no criminal background, but that he actually has multiple misdemeanor convictions. They found out through an anonymous tip and terminated him immediately for falsifying his application. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to voice. Did you know? Tom asked quietly. The question hit me like a physical blow. Tom was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not quite accusation, but definitely suspicion. My mouth went dry as I realized this was the moment I should have prepared for but somehow hadn't. Know what? I asked, buying time while my brain scrambled for the right response. About Jake's criminal record. Did you know he had misdemeanor convictions? I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was my chance to come clean, to tell Tom everything, about the background check, about my growing resentment, about what I'd done. But looking at his confused, hurt expression, I couldn't bring myself to deliver another devastating blow. I had no idea, I said, hating how easily the lie came out. When would I have found out about something like that? Tom nodded slowly, seeming to accept this, but his next words made my stomach lurch. The person at AutoZone said they received an anonymous tip. Someone called and told them to look into Jake's background more carefully. He paused, running a hand through his hair. Who would do something like that? And how would they even know to look? The irony was suffocating. Here I was, pretending to be as mystified as Tom while being the architect of the entire situation. Maybe someone at work had it in for him? I suggested weakly. But he's only worked there a few months. And he's always said everyone there liked him. Tom was thinking out loud now, pacing again. Unless, do you think this could be related to his ex-girlfriend? Sarah? She was pretty angry when they broke up. I seized on this lifeline gratefully. That's possible. Didn't he say she was being vindictive about their split? Yeah, she was texting him nasty stuff for weeks. Tom's expression was shifting from confusion to anger. If she sabotaged his job out of spite, that's beyond petty. That's destructive. Watching Tom redirect his anger toward an innocent girl made my guilt spike sharply, but I couldn't bring myself to correct him. Instead, I found myself nodding along as he built a case against Sarah in his head. I should have insisted he file a restraining order, Tom muttered. I knew she was trouble, but I thought she'd just move on eventually. The front door slammed, and we both jumped. Jake's voice carried from the entryway, tired and defeated. I'm home. Living room, Tom called back, and I braced myself for whatever was about to unfold. Jake appeared in the doorway looking like he hadn't slept. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair messy, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, seeing him like this, I felt a sharp pang of something that might have been regret. Dad, I can explain. I already called AutoZone, Tom interrupted. Why didn't you tell me about the misdemeanor charges? Jake's eyes flicked to me briefly, then back to his father. Because I knew you'd be disappointed. And they happened when I was 17, I thought they wouldn't matter for a stupid retail job. What were the charges for? Tom asked, his voice gentler now. Jake shifted uncomfortably. Vandalism and trespassing. Me and some friends got caught spray painting an abandoned building. It was stupid teenage stuff. And you thought lying about it was better than being honest? I thought it wouldn't come up. Jake's voice cracked slightly. I've been a good employee. This is so unfair. Tom moved toward his son, parental instinct overriding everything else. We'll figure this out, okay? Maybe there's a way to appeal, or we can help you find something else. As I watched this father-son moment unfold, the weight of what I'd done settled over me like a heavy blanket. Jake might be difficult and disrespectful, but seeing him broken like this made me question whether my revenge had been worth it. Jake's vulnerability lasted about 30 seconds before his usual defensive attitude kicked back in. Actually, Dad, I think I know who did this to me, he said, straightening up and shooting me a look that made my blood run cold. It's too convenient that someone just happened to call in an anonymous tip right after our fight the other day. Tom looked confused. What fight? Oh, didn't she tell you? Jake's voice carried a dangerous edge. Your wife and I had a little disagreement about respect and authority. She was pretty pissed off at me. My heart started racing. Jake, that's ridiculous. Why would I? Because you've had it out for me since day one, Jake interrupted, his exhaustion giving way to familiar anger. You've been looking for ways to get rid of me, and now suddenly someone anonymously reports me to my job? Come on. Tom looked between us, clearly trying to piece together information he didn't have. What fight? When did this happen? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. I could see Jake calculating how much to reveal, weighing his desire for revenge against the need to avoid admitting what he'd done to my phone. It was Monday, Jake said carefully. We had a disagreement about house rules. She was being totally unreasonable, and I might have lost my temper a little. Define lost your temper, Tom said, his parental radar clearly pinging. Jake's jaw tightened. I just told her what I thought about her trying to parent me when she's not my mom. I could feel Tom's eyes on me, waiting for my version. This was spiraling out of control fast. If Jake admitted to smashing my phone, Tom would finally have to confront his son's behavior. But if Jake revealed that, I'd have to explain why I never told Tom about it, which would lead to questions about what I did for revenge. It was just typical teenage attitude, I said quickly. Nothing worth dwelling on. See? Jake pounced on my deflection. She's lying right now. It wasn't typical teenage attitude. She was furious with me, Dad. Furious enough to destroy my life apparently. Jake, that's a serious accusation, Tom said slowly. Are you actually suggesting that my wife called your employer? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what happened. The confidence in Jake's voice terrified me. Had he figured it out somehow? Did he have proof, or was he just fishing? That's insane, I said, probably too forcefully. I don't even know anything about your work situation. I wouldn't know who to call or what to say. Jake laughed bitterly. Right. Because it's so hard to Google AutoZone corporate number and say, hey, you should check Jake Mitchell's background more carefully. Tom held up his hands. Okay, everyone just calm down. Jake, you're upset and you're looking for someone to blame. But accusing my wife of sabotaging your job is way out of line. Is it though? Jake pressed. Think about it, Dad. Who else would care enough to hurt me like this? Who else even knew about our fight? Your ex-girlfriend Sarah was pretty angry, Tom started. Sarah doesn't know where I work. She doesn't know my last name is different from yours. She wouldn't even think to look me up. Jake's voice was rising. But someone in this house would know exactly where to find me. The logic was sound, and I could see Tom starting to waver. Jake might be impulsive and disrespectful, but he wasn't stupid. This is ridiculous, I tried again. Why would I jeopardize your job? That would just mean you'd be home more, which is the last thing I'd want if we're supposedly having problems. It was the wrong thing to say. Both Tom and Jake stared at me, and I realized I just admitted that I preferred Jake not being around. The silence that followed was deafening. What did you just say? Tom's voice was dangerously quiet. I realized my mistake immediately, but there was no taking it back. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant. You just said the last thing you'd want is Jake being home more. Tom's expression was shifting from confusion to something much colder. My son. In his own house. Jake crossed his arms, a satisfied smirk creeping across his face. There it is, Dad. Your wife just admitted she doesn't want me around. That's not what I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew how hollow they sounded. The truth was, I didn't want Jake around more than necessary. After 2 years of his constant disrespect and challenges to my authority, after Tom's refusal to truly address the behavior, I was exhausted by the entire dynamic. Tom sat down heavily on the couch, looking between Jake and me like he was seeing us both clearly for the first time. How long has this been going on? This, tension between you two? Since she moved in, Jake said immediately. She's been trying to replace Mom from day one, making rules, acting like she owns the place. I live here too. I snapped, my composure finally cracking. I married your father, which makes this my home as much as yours. But you've never accepted that, have you? You've spent 2 years testing me, pushing boundaries, seeing how much you could get away with before Tom would actually do something about it. There it is, Jake said triumphantly. She's been keeping score this whole time, Dad. Every little thing, building up resentment. Tom held up his hands again, but his gesture lacked conviction. Look, I know the adjustment has been hard for everyone. Hard? I laughed bitterly. Tom, your son has never shown me an ounce of respect. He ignores everything I say, treats me like I'm some unwelcome guest, and you always excuse it as adjustment or boys being boys or him still grieving his mother. Don't bring my mom into this, Jake's voice turned dangerous. You're not her, and you never will be. I'm not trying to be her. I shot back. I'm trying to be your father's wife and have some basic respect in my own home. Enough. Tom's shout silenced us both. He stood up, running both hands through his hair. This is exactly what I was afraid of when I got remarried. This, poison between you two. It doesn't have to be poison, I said, trying to regain control of the conversation. Jake just needs to accept that I'm part of this family now. By destroying my job? Jake countered. Real mature, stepmom. I didn't destroy your job. But my protest sounded weak even to me. Tom was studying my face now, really looking at me. The timing is suspicious, he said slowly. Jake's right about that. You two have a fight Monday, and by Wednesday he's fired? Correlation isn't causation, I said, falling back on logic. And I still don't even know what this fight was actually about. Jake's being deliberately vague. Jake's smirk faltered slightly. We both knew why he was being vague, admitting he'd smashed my phone would only make him look worse. But his hesitation gave me an opening. What exactly did happen Monday, Jake? I pressed. What was this fight really about? Because if you're going to accuse me of sabotaging your job over it, maybe your father should know the whole story. Jake's eyes narrowed. Maybe he should. Maybe it's time Dad knew exactly what kind of person he married. The thread hung in the air between us. If Jake revealed what he'd done to my phone, I'd have to explain why I never told Tom. But if he didn't, his accusation against me would lose credibility. Tom looked exhausted. I want the truth. From both of you. Right now. The moment stretched between us like a tightrope. Jake's eyes darted between his father and me, clearly weighing his options. I could practically see the calculations running through his head, tell the truth about the phone and admit to destructive behavior, or stick to his guns and try to make me crack first. Monday night, Jake finally began. She came home from work in a bad mood and started going off about dishes in the sink. I told her I'd get to them later, but she wouldn't drop it. Started lecturing me about responsibility and respect like I'm some little kid. I felt my jaw clench. He was spinning it, making himself the victim while carefully omitting the crucial details. That's not how it happened, I said evenly. You had friends over without asking, they left a mess in the kitchen, and when I asked you to clean it up, you told me I wasn't your mother and couldn't tell you what to do. See how she twists everything? Jake appealed to Tom. I have friends over, which Dad said was fine, and suddenly I'm the bad guy for not jumping when she snaps her fingers. Tom rubbed his temples. Okay, so you disagreed about cleaning up. That hardly seems worth. There's more, Jake interrupted, shooting me a warning look. She got really nasty about it. Started threatening to talk to your father about my attitude. So I told her what I thought about her constant threats to tattle on me. My heart was racing. He was edging closer to the truth but still trying to paint himself as the reasonable one. And how exactly did you tell me what you thought, Jake? The question hung there like a challenge. Jake's confident facade flickered for just a moment. I expressed my frustration. Maybe I raised my voice a little. Raised your voice, I repeated slowly. Is that what you call it? Tom looked between us, clearly sensing there was more to the story. What aren't you two telling me? Jake shifted uncomfortably. Nothing, Dad. She's just trying to make it sound worse than it was. Am I? I could feel my anger building again, remembering the sound of my phone hitting the wall, the sick feeling of seeing it shattered on the floor. Jake, why don't you tell your father about my phone? The color drained from Jake's face. What about your phone? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Tom frowned. What's this about a phone? Jake's mouth opened and closed like he was struggling for words. I could see the panic setting in as he realized he'd backed himself into a corner. There might have been an accident, Jake said weakly. An accident? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. You call deliberately smashing someone's phone against a wall an accident? You smashed her phone? Tom's voice was incredulous. Jake's defiance crumbled. I didn't mean to break it. I grabbed it and threw it, okay? But I didn't think it would. You grabbed my phone and threw it at the wall because I asked you to clean up after yourself, I said, my voice shaking with remembered fury. $800 worth of phone, destroyed because you couldn't handle being asked to show basic respect. Tom stared at his son in shock. Jake, please tell me you didn't actually. She was threatening to call you. Jake exploded. She was going to make me look bad, tell you lies about what happened, so I grabbed her phone to stop her. I didn't mean for it to break. So you destroyed it, Tom said quietly. The room fell silent except for the sound of our heavy breathing. I could see Tom processing this new information, finally understanding the scope of what had happened between his son and me. And you never told me about this, he said to me, his voice carefully neutral. I swallowed hard. No. I didn't. Why not? The question I'd been dreading. Because the answer would reveal everything. I took a shaky breath, feeling both their eyes on me. Because I knew what would happen. I knew you'd find some way to excuse it, make it about his grief or his adjustment issues. Boys will be boys, right? That's what you always say when Jake crosses a line. Tom's face darkened. That's not fair, Sarah. You should have told me. Should I have? My voice cracked slightly. When have you ever actually held Jake accountable for anything? When he broke the neighbor's window playing football in the yard, you paid for it and said accidents happen. When he brought home a failing grade because he skipped class, you got him a tutor instead of consequences. When he crashed his car last year. That was different, Tom interrupted. He could have been hurt. And every time, I watched you enable him while he learned that there are no real consequences for his actions. I was fully crying now, 2 years of frustration pouring out. So no, Tom, I didn't tell you about the phone because I was tired of watching you protect him from facing reality. Jake had gone very quiet, but I could see him processing something. His eyes had a calculating look that made my stomach drop. Wait, Jake said slowly. Wait just a damn minute. He looked directly at me. You're saying you didn't tell Dad about the phone because you knew he wouldn't do anything about it? That's exactly what I'm saying. Jake's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. But someone did do something about it, didn't they? Someone made sure I faced consequences. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tom looked between us, confusion written across his face. What are you getting at, Jake? Tom asked. She's been planning this, Jake said, his voice gaining confidence. Don't you see, Dad? She didn't tell you about the phone because she had something else in mind. Something bigger. My mouth went dry. Jake, don't. She wanted me to get away with breaking her phone, Jake continued, talking faster now. Because then she could justify whatever she did to get me fired. She could tell herself it was fair, that I deserved it because I never faced consequences. Tom was staring at me now with a look I'd never seen before. Sarah, is that true? No. But my denial came out too fast, too desperate. Tom, that's not, I never planned. You did, though, Jake pressed. You sat on that broken phone for 2 days, didn't mention it to Dad, and then magically I lose my job. You used it as justification for whatever you did. I didn't do anything to your job. The lie burned my throat as I said it. Then prove it, Jake challenged. Call my boss right now. Ask him exactly what happened, what information he received and when. The silence stretched unbearably long. I could feel Tom's eyes boring into me, could see him putting the pieces together. My hands were shaking. Sarah, Tom's voice was barely above a whisper. What did you do? Jake leaned back against the couch, and for the first time since this whole conversation started, he looked genuinely satisfied. She cost me my job, Dad. Your wife deliberately sabotaged me because she was angry about a stupid fight. It wasn't stupid, I whispered. You destroyed my property and showed no remorse. So you destroyed my future? Jake shot back. Tom stood up abruptly. I need some air. He headed toward the back door, then stopped. When I come back in, I want the complete truth from both of you. No more games, no more half-stories. He looked directly at me. Especially from you, Sarah. The door slammed behind him, leaving Jake and me alone with the wreckage of our secrets. The silence after Tom left felt suffocating. Jake and I sat there, neither of us speaking, the weight of what had just happened settling between us like a toxic cloud. I could hear Tom pacing on the back deck, his footsteps heavy and agitated. You think you're so smart, Jake said finally, his voice low and venomous. But you just destroyed your own marriage. I turned to look at him, this 19-year-old who had somehow managed to back me into a corner. You destroyed my phone first. An $800 phone versus my entire future, Jake laughed bitterly. Yeah, that seems proportional. Your future? I felt my anger flaring again. Jake, you lost a job at a hardware store, not a career at NASA. You can find another job. Can I? His eyes glittered with something that might have been tears, but his voice remained hard. Because now I have to explain to every potential employer why I got fired from my first real job. And thanks to whatever you told them, it's probably not going to be a good reference. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't thought about that, how this would follow him to future job applications. But then I remembered his smug face when my phone hit the wall, his complete lack of remorse, and my resolve hardened again. Maybe you should have thought about consequences before you lost control and broke someone else's property. There it is, Jake said, leaning forward. The real Sarah. Not the sweet stepmother act you put on for Dad. You've been waiting for an excuse to hurt me, haven't you? That's not true. Isn't it? Jake's voice was getting louder. You never wanted me here. You wanted Dad all to yourself, and I was just this inconvenient reminder that he had a life before you. Jake, stop. You probably wish I'd never come back from Mom's at all. Probably hoped I'd stay there permanently so you could play house without the messy stepkid getting in your way. That's enough. I stood up, my hands clenched into fists. You don't get to psychoanalyze me, Jake. You don't get to pretend this is about anything other than your complete inability to show basic respect. Respect? Jake laughed harshly. You want respect? You just proved you don't deserve any. Dad's going to see exactly who you really are now. Through the sliding glass door, I could see Tom had stopped pacing. He was standing at the deck railing, his shoulders rigid with tension. My heart was hammering against my ribs. You know what the worst part is? Jake continued, his voice dropping to an almost conversational tone. I actually tried to like you at first. When Dad first started dating you, I thought maybe it would be good for him. Maybe good for both of us. I felt something crack inside my chest. Jake. But you couldn't just be his wife, could you? You had to try to parent me. Had to insert yourself into every decision, every conversation. Had to make sure I knew you were in charge now. I was trying to be part of the family. You were trying to replace my mom. Jake's composure finally shattered. Every time you tried to set rules for me, every time you acted like you had authority over me, it was like you were erasing her. Like because she's gone, you get to just step in and take over. The sliding door opened with a sharp scrape. Tom stood in the doorway, his face pale and drawn. I could hear you two shouting from outside. Jake wiped his eyes quickly, but not before I saw the tears. Real ones this time. I can't do this anymore, Dad, Jake said quietly. I can't live in the same house as someone who hates me enough to sabotage my job. Tom's gaze moved between us, and I could see him making calculations, weighing loyalties. The look in his eyes terrified me more than anything Jake had said. Maybe, Tom said slowly, we all need some space to think about this. Space? The word came out sharper than I intended. What kind of space? Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. I think Jake should stay at his mom's for a while. Until we figure this out. No. Jake's voice was flat. I'm not running away. This is my home too, Dad. I lived here before she did. The barb hit its mark. I felt my face flush hot. Tom, can we talk privately? Actually, Tom said, still not looking at me, I think we've had enough private conversations. Seems like that's where the problems start. Jake made a sound that might have been a laugh. Finally. Don't, Tom warned his son. Just don't. You're not innocent in this either. I never said I was. But at least I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Jake, what exactly do you think I'm pretending to be? A victim. He stood up, and for a moment he looked older than 19. You're sitting there acting like I'm this terrible person who attacked you for no reason, but you know what really happened. Tom frowned. What really happened? Jake looked at me expectantly. When I didn't speak, he continued. She didn't just ask me to clean up after myself, Dad. She threatened to have you kick me out if I didn't follow her rules. That's not, I started, but the words died in my throat because it wasn't entirely untrue. You said what? Tom's voice was dangerously quiet. I said that if he couldn't respect our home, maybe he needed to find somewhere else to live, I admitted. But Tom, he'd been leaving messes everywhere, coming in at all hours, completely ignoring every boundary we set. We? Jake interrupted. Or you? Because Dad never had a problem with any of that stuff until you moved in. Tom ran his hands through his hair. Sarah, you threatened to kick my son out of his own home? It's my home too. The words exploded out of me. I live here. I pay bills here. I have a right to feel comfortable in my own house. But it's not just your house, Tom said slowly. It's ours. All of ours. Is it? I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Because every time there's a conflict, every time Jake and I disagree about something, you take his side. Every single time. That's not true. Name one time you backed me up. One time you've told Jake he was wrong or that he needed to apologize to me. The silence stretched long enough that my point was made. That's what I thought, I whispered. Jake was watching this exchange with growing alarm. Dad? Tom looked lost. I was trying to keep the peace. Trying to make sure Jake felt secure here. And what about me feeling secure here? You're my wife. You're not going anywhere. Aren't I? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Tom's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression changed. It's your mother, he told Jake. She says she needs to talk to me about what happened at your job. My blood turned to ice. Jake's face went white. What would Mom know about my job? Jake asked carefully. Tom was already answering the phone. Linda? What's going on? I couldn't hear her side of the conversation, but I watched Tom's expression grow darker with each passing second. I see, Tom said finally. Yes, I think we need to have that conversation. Tonight. He hung up and looked directly at me. She's coming over. Apparently, Jake's former boss is her neighbor, and he mentioned some very interesting details about an anonymous tip they received. The walls felt like they were closing in. My mouth went completely dry. Tom, I can explain. Can you? His voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. Because I'm starting to wonder how many other things you've been doing behind my back. Jake was staring at me with something between horror and fascination. What anonymous tip? Tom's phone buzzed again. This time he put it on speaker. Tom? It's Linda. I'm in your driveway. The next few minutes passed in a blur. Linda swept into the house like a woman on a mission, her usually perfect composure cracking around the edges. She'd always been polite to me, distantly civil, but now she looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. Jake, honey, go upstairs, she said without taking her eyes off me. Mom, I'm 19. I don't need to. Go. Upstairs. Now. The authority in her voice brooked no argument. Jake shot me one last unreadable look and disappeared up the stairs. Linda waited until she heard his door close before turning to Tom. Bill Morrison called me about an hour ago. You remember Bill? He lives 2 houses down from me? Manages the hardware store on 5th Street? My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. He was pretty upset, Linda continued. Said someone called the store today with some very detailed information about Jake's background. Information that wasn't on his job application. Tom's gaze fixed on me like a laser. What kind of information? The kind that would only be known by someone with access to juvenile records, Linda said. The kind that's supposed to be sealed. The kind that someone would have had to dig pretty deep to find. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't access any sealed records. You just what? Tom's voice was barely controlled. Because my ex-wife seems to think you somehow found out about charges that were dismissed when Jake was 17. Charges that don't show up on standard background checks. How would you even know about that? Linda demanded. Jake never told you. Tom doesn't know the details. So how exactly did you come by that information? The truth was going to sound so much worse than whatever they were imagining. I may have looked into his background after some of our conflicts. Looked into his background how? Tom stepped closer to me. Sarah, what did you do? I hired someone, I whispered. A private investigator. Just to see if there was a pattern of behavior I should be worried about. The silence that followed was deafening. You hired a private investigator, Tom repeated slowly, to spy on my son. Not spy. Just background research. For my own peace of mind. Linda laughed, but there was no humor in it. Peace of mind? You invaded my child's privacy, dug up sealed juvenile records, and then used that information to destroy his employment. For peace of mind? He broke my phone. He destroyed my property and showed no remorse. So you destroyed his future, Linda shot back. Do you have any idea how hard it was for him to get that job? How many applications he filled out? How excited he was to finally have some independence? Tom was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. When did you hire the investigator? The question I'd been dreading. A few months ago. Months? Tom's voice cracked. You've been investigating Jake for months? Tom, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you've been plotting against my son since what, Christmas? Earlier? Linda pulled out her phone. Bill said the person who called knew very specific details. The exact dates, the specific charges, even which courthouse handled the case. That's not information you get from a basic background check. How much did you pay for this? Tom demanded. I couldn't meet his eyes. That's not important. How much, Sarah? $1,500. The number hung in the air like an accusation. $1,500 to destroy a 19-year-old's first job. When put like that, it sounded even worse than it was. $1,500, Tom repeated numbly. You spent $1,500 of our money to dig up dirt on my son. Linda was already heading for the stairs. Jake. Come down here. Now. Jake came down the stairs slowly, his face pale but determined. He looked between his parents and then at me, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before, disappointment mixed with what might have been pity. How long have you known? He asked me directly. Known what? I tried to deflect, but we were past that point. About the charges. About what happened when I was 17. Tom looked confused. What charges? Jake, what is everyone talking about? Jake sat down heavily on the couch. I got arrested for vandalism when I was 17. Me and some friends spray painted an abandoned building. It was stupid, and I knew it was stupid, but I did it anyway. He looked at his father. The charges were dismissed after I did community service. My lawyer said it would be sealed, that it wouldn't affect my future. Why didn't you tell me? Tom asked. Because I was ashamed. Because I knew you'd be disappointed. Because Mom said I didn't have to tell anyone since the record was sealed. Jake's voice got stronger. But apparently sealed doesn't mean private when someone's willing to pay $1,500 to invade your life. Linda put her hand on Jake's shoulder. Bill said they fired you immediately. No questions, no chance to explain. Yeah, Jake nodded. They said I'd lied on my application by not disclosing it. When I tried to explain that it was sealed and I was told I didn't have to report it, they said someone had called with very specific information that made them question my character and honesty. Tom turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. You cost him his job over spray paint? It wasn't just about the spray paint, I said desperately. It was about the pattern of disrespect, the attitude. He was 17, Linda interrupted. He made one mistake when he was 17, paid for it through the legal system, and learned from it. That job was the first thing he'd been excited about in years. Jake stood up. You want to know something funny? I was actually starting to like you a little bit before all this happened. That hit me harder than I expected. What? The day before our fight, I was talking to Mom about how maybe I'd been too hard on you. How maybe I should try harder to get along with you because you made Dad happy. He shook his head. But then you threatened to have Dad kick me out, and I lost it. And I broke your phone, which was wrong, and I was planning to apologize and offer to pay for it. You were? Tom asked. I was going to use my first paycheck, Jake said quietly. The paycheck from the job I'll never get now. The weight of what I'd done settled over me like a lead blanket. Jake, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. You never asked. You just assumed the worst about me and went looking for evidence to support what you'd already decided. He looked at his father. Dad, I'm going to stay with Mom for a while. I think that's best for everyone. Tom nodded slowly. Maybe that's a good idea. Just until we figure things out. Linda gathered her purse. We'll be in touch about how to handle this situation with his employer. There might be legal implications to what you've done. As they headed for the door, Jake turned back to me one last time. You know what's really messed up? If you'd just talked to me, really talked to me instead of issuing ultimatums, we probably could have worked things out. But instead, you hired a private investigator like I was some kind of criminal. After they left, Tom and I sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, he spoke. I don't know how we come back from this, Sarah. Looking around our empty house, neither did I.